All right. Well, last session of the day, so hopefully we'll be able to provide some value to the audience. My name is Stryker. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Varde Partners. Varde Partners is a hedge fund alternative asset manager located in Minneapolis. We're roughly about 350 people globally. We have a unique profile in that we're a relatively small organization, so we have 13 offices around the world. We also manage roughly $15 billion on behalf of our investors, many of which are public pensions, sovereign wealth funds, high net worth individuals. So we are, an interesting profile in terms of our cyber posture, and not only the fact that we have to deal with a lot of regional and global issues, but we're also a very target-rich environment in terms of the money that we manage. So, my goal here today is to make this as interactive as possible. We've got 4 panelists up here that I think will be able to share some really great insights, offer some good advice on how to deal with hopefully many of the issues that you are struggling with. I'll let each of the panelists introduce themselves. Just, you guys can just tell everyone who you are, where you work, and a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into some of the topics.
I promise not to take too long. Is it actually? Okay, great. I promise I won't beatbox into this, but my name is Porroni. I am Managing Director and CIO of Valiant Consulting. We are a consulting firm that we work directly with executive teams to be able to implement and plan out technology strategy, regardless of whether it's security-oriented or even if it's about making sure that your tech budget is actually going to carry through to ROI. We have worked with plenty of different industries, law, finance, heavy industry of different sorts, and I'm super jazzed to be on this panel, even though I'm sure it's like the end of the day and everybody's like, okay, we have a nap, but I'm super ready to pumped with the conversation.
I'm Jesse Miller. I work for Stratosphere Networks. We're a managed service provider and a managed security service provider, so MSP and MSSP. We provide services mainly for small to medium businesses, 5,000 endpoints and under. I've been in IT about 20 years, various different departments and focuses. Been in cybersecurity about 5. But yeah, we excited to be here and talk with everyone, and looking forward to hearing some great questions from you guys.
Good afternoon, my name is Tony Taylor. I'm the CISO of Analytics. I've been there about 20 years, full-time CISO for the last 3, and prior to that I've led all their infrastructure engineering and operations teams. So I always say I have security for 20 years, but officially the CISO for the last 3.
My name is Abela. I'm a business technologist with over 20 years in information governance and data management. I am currently the information security systems advisor for Reciprocity ROI. I sit on the board of the CompTIA Emerging Technologies down in the Southwest Metro, and I'm also a member of the Equal Group of Minnesota Veterans, where I help coach and mentor veterans through transition challenges.
Great. One housekeeping note, we do have a roaming mic, so if anyone in the audience has any questions while we're going through the panel, just raise your hand and I'll do my best to acknowledge your question and pass it over to the panel. Before we start, I think it'd probably be a good idea to get an idea around demographics. So how many CISOs in the room? If you just raise your hand. How many people in operations? How many people in compliance or finance? And how many of you work in organizations smaller than 500 people? Larger than 500? All right, so a good mix. Very good. So, I'm going to start it off with a question, related to the role of the CISO and where it should sit. So, I'll ask each panelist for their own opinion. So the first question I have is, where should the CISO sit? Should it report into the CIO? Should it report into a Chief Risk Officer? Start with Adam and get your perspective on that question.
So we had a pretty cool on this earlier. There were some very passionate opinions. My personal point of view is look at mature organizations and look at a mature CFO and how does that work within, or how does that role work within the organization, and then look at the CISO or anyone, even if it's like chief security, regardless of information specific or physical or anything kind of security overall, and relate the two. So if you have a CFO that typically might either be sitting at full board level or right below COO, you might want to do something similar with CISO, because they can continually make those kinds of harsh decisions about, so the CFO looks at things and says, okay, look, we just don't have this in the budget, we can't do this. The CISO can do a similar thing about, we are just not positioned well for this, or we need to do this, even if it is not something that is the coolest thing to do. We have to shut something down, we have to handle some issue in order to mitigate risk.
I kind of agree with what you're saying in terms of it does depend on the organization, because needs in one organization are going to look different than another. And size is going to matter too. Some organizations might not have a full-time CISO, especially 100,000 users. To me, if I'm making a blanket statement, I'd probably say that I think, and it's not a very popular opinion actually, but I think the CISO should report to the CIO. In my talking operationally speaking, I think there needs to be some sort of power structure within an organization as far as IT is concerned. And for example, if you have the CISO and the CIO who don't report, who don't have to work together per se, or don't have a relation, directed relation, there can be problems there. So I think, although the CISO, I do believe, should have a seat at the table in terms of meetings, I think there needs to be some sort of reporting up to IT, an IT strategy leadership position, and Tony might have a different opinion on that.
So I'm going to argue that it doesn't matter. I'm going to say that the CISO has to have great relationships with the CIO in order to get a lot of things done. You have to be connected to the chief risk officers if there is one. You have to be connected to finance, legal, and HR. For me, in my role, they are my steering team. So as long as I can get access to those people, because they're the ones who are evaluating their risk posture and how much they're willing to take. Because I'm not going to eliminate all risk, and it's really important for me to have the conversation with the right people to understand what the risks are within Land O'Lakes and how they're perceived by them. I'm the execution guy, I'm going to go make things happen. We're all going to equally vote on what's important to good things.
These days, you can't turn on the news without hearing about some sort of data breach or some sort of software exploit that's been going on. That directly relates to where a CISO should sit in an organization, because our society as a whole is expecting people to be more and more accountable for their personal data, the data that companies do have. Bringing that CISO role and putting it on par with let's call them the C-level of an organization, allows them to have that voice, much like Tony was saying, allows them to have that voice up front so that they can, the company can hear what are the needs coming out of that information security requirements. Information security has been something that has basically come really to light in the past decade or two. But from a societal standpoint, we have been developing systems for much longer than that. Part of having that CISO move up front is to see how can we start driving that whole idea about adding security in from the very beginning of projects that companies are working on.
Great. Any questions or comments from the audience? All right.
Okay, as the lines between fraud and cyber threats start to blur, what keeps each of you up at night?
I'd say the employees in the organization. Yeah, the human factor, I think, is probably the most concerning. If that's what jumped to my mind, what keeps me up at night, did a salesman click on an email? that's what I think about.
Yeah, I'll just chime in here. I think a lot of it, when you start looking at the overall landscape of security, there's a lot of things that IT folks talk about in terms of tools and technologies you can implement. But one of the things that is a real factor is social engineering, and it's how do you, you're talking about fraud. How do you make sure that people aren't taking advantage through social engineering attacks and getting the information, driving it into the company to get away with doing fraudulent activities?
To continue on that, like there's, of course, there are a lot of things that keep me up at night, just a lot. There's so many things about the world terrifying. But at the same time, I think it's about understanding the and I hate to be like philosophical about it, but like the definition of technology and like what actually falls under the realm of like what you're supposed to think about. Because there's this notion of like how big is the door that somebody has to walk through, or whatever the threat is that walks through, and how much how much damage or how much risk is taken on by that side of that door. So like to get it not in some analogy or some allegory that doesn't make any sense is more about how much likelihood is there that somebody just doing their job well, okay, like doing good business, is actually going to open us up for some risk. Okay, so like if I could just, I'm just looking at an email, I'm just doing, like I can contextualize in a way that's simple and easy, and I'm just supposed to be doing this. Now all of a sudden a phishing attack comes in, right? Because it's this tiny, isolated incident that then leads to a cascade. That's a type of thing that keeps me up.
I guess I would echo the other folks. First is the human and what they do. I think there's a fair amount of technology that even what they do and click on, you're pretty good at preventative capabilities. I get really nervous about once they're in, can I really tell if they're in? What are my detection capabilities, strengths? I think most of us are doing EDR and endpoint stuff and all the things that make it hard to get in. You got vulnerability threat management practices. But once they're in, can you really tell they're in? Can you really see it go east and west? Do you have that capability? That keeps me awake.
Yeah, all great answers, and I think I would agree that the human element is the key piece. I would take it a step further and say, we talked about this a bit prior to the session, is the thing that keeps me up at night, quite honestly, is the social engineering and human element, but mostly at the executive level. The people that are probably aware of the threat as most, but don't necessarily want to be bothered with the technical details. And I think a lot of being successful in cyber is really the alignment between the entire organization and making sure that people respect kind of the threat, but also contemplate it in a business sense, right? So it's not just about spending dollars to put a firewall in, but it's really like, what are the risks that we're mitigating, and what are the things that we're doing, whether it's reputational risk or data loss, what are the things that are most important to your organization? So for a firm like ours, it's protecting your customers like most. So gentleman in the back has a question.
So a quick question following that. If the human factor is the most essence of the security concern, will the future be safer if we're going a lot with implementations with IoTs and autonomous things, robotics? Will things get safer in the future?
So the question is, in the future, with the greater presence of IoT, does that make us more safe or less safe?
I think there was a comment around RPA in there too, robotic process automation. That takes a human out of some processes. It introduces a different type of element for risk of who built that RPA and how may that RPA get compromised. So I don't know that they, if that helps them or not. IoT is a whole other subject, and I think we're going to talk about that maybe a little bit. So IoT doesn't make it easier either. That just makes it a lot more difficult.
So actually tied to the time to detect and whether you're even detecting what you think you're detecting. How do you see that tied to, if you took RPA and now all of a sudden we're just leaving things as is, right? Something's happening, okay, so wouldn't that actually lead to more obfuscation of the problem, right? Like that's something that concerns me about the concept of we take the human out or we take another check step out, that all of a sudden this becomes something that we don't know what's wrong, and we also don't know if there's something that was actually going well, and how do we improve that?
I think one of the good things around RPA is, because it's a program, it does the same thing. Humans might not do the same process the same way. I mean, an accounts payable group might have 3 people, they do it 3 different ways. Once you introduce RPA, it does it the same way all the time. So as long as you have good practices and you pattern what the right way is, and then you can manage and audit and detect when that process changes, I would say that part's easier.
And to echo what Tony was saying, I don't think that you're going to be able to remove the human component entirely. I think over time things are going to change. How people interact with technology is going to change. When we start talking about them being replaced with IoT and RPA, that, in my mind, drives towards things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and trying to determine, how smart can we get, how quickly, and that comes from machine intelligence. Are there things that we're not even looking at today because it's so far beyond our comprehension as technology is growing that we might start to discover as we start to unleash AIs or some sort of machine learning to actually take a look at these problems?
Yeah, I guess to answer the question as I see it, is I don't know whether it will be more difficult or easier, but what I can say is that it will be different. And I think the human condition is that we always adapt to whatever new challenges face us. And so it's an arms race between attackers and defenders, and I don't think that's ending anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting side of the question, right? Because we can think of it from the defender side, okay, we've automated stuff, we've made this, we've used whatever we can to take the human out. But what is the attack?
So we have another question over here. Apologies.
Hi. So with ESRM and the somewhat merger, not quite, of corporate / physical security, do you ever see CISO ever assuming all of those roles, or do you see it staying separate? I've been in physical security, corporate security for 41 years. I've never had anything to do with IT, so that's why I'm asking.
I can tell you, so we have a physical security group, and we work together a lot on investigations. I can also tell you that Medtronic's CISO is also their CSO. So in some organizations, it is put together. In fact, I've been thinking about that in our organization. I think it'd actually be better if we work together. There would be more synergies. Now, if you have a great working relationship, kind of like the question about where the CISO should report to, as long as you're networked and you have the right connections and there's that trust factor between you, I think it can work either way. It would be easier if physical and cyber work together, though, in my opinion.
I agree. I think that in any organization, when you start talking about the various types of security across, you have to drive it up to one, either individual or group that has overall cognizance of these sorts of issues. Because you might have one thing in one area that's going to affect something somewhere else. And if you have those split, you're going to have, we're going to implement something over here that might cause problems somewhere else. But without having those people understand, hey, this is what we're changing, and even in physical security, if you're going to go in there and say you start changing out RFID badges or something like that, that can cause a whole lot of issues on internal systems as far as identity management is concerned.
So we have a question in the back and then one up here.
Thank you. I have a question kind of about your opinion on privacy versus protection of data in regards to whether it's states demanding, decryption keys or trying to do that, or the emergence of TLS 1.3 to make it harder for corporate networks to, decrypt company data that flows through their IPS or whatever other systems they have.
So I'm not sure that I understand your question exactly, so I'm going to answer it, and then you tell me if I got it wrong. Because I think part of your question is privacy for internal. What's the issue with like breaking open SSL and looking at every packet inside that network? Is that a privacy issue or not? No, it's not a privacy issue. You work for analytics, so I'm going to look at your data. The other part, I think, goes back to like what keeps me awake at night. The state privacy laws that are evolving keep me awake at night. And CCPA and every other state, because it's not regulated at a federal level, states are going wild, and what they're going to ask every organization to do, big or small, around privacy and protection and disclosure is kind of going nuts. And that's where the government needs to stand in and go. We're going to have one U.S. Policy by GDPR for the U.S. versus we're going to let California do their thing and Massachusetts do theirs. And we're going to be in the middle trying to do 52 different regulations.
And we're starting to see the effects of these sorts of policies. If you start looking at the GDPR, for instance, you know, in the past couple of days, there's been two huge fines levied. One against British Airways for, I think it was 183 million pounds, and one against Marriott International for another 100 million pounds. So governments are starting to take this very seriously. They're starting to look at what our company's doing, and you know, who does have the right to these. I think ultimately, from a CISO perspective, you know, you have to have and make sure that the data that you have, data that you're collecting in the company, you understand and you manage it properly. It's the idea of we're going to go out there and collect everything from everyone and hold it forever is not going to fly anymore. It's going out there and putting together a policy that actually applies to what you're doing and how you're going to handle people's information.
And that's a balance of risk, right? Like, the more you take in, the more you have to be responsible for, the more you have to manage, the more you have to have infrastructure to support. So I think, but one thing I definitely kind of want to know is, was the nature of the question about like if a company handled consumer data and that kind of level of privacy, because that's a whole can of worms that we can of course talk about.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking in terms of also as well, like you said, any data that flows to your network is, you know, owned by the analytics, which I don't disagree with. However, like in that situation, if you have employees logged on to Facebook or their bank account, you will have their, you know, usernames and passwords and credentials, and you also have the responsibility to make sure that that data doesn't get, you know, hacked or stolen or similar, doesn't get leaked, and all of a sudden China, you know, has, you know, your employees' bank information due to, you know, some breach in your system.
You know, I think that, all good points. I think where that comes in is making sure that you have a well-documented, fair, acceptable use policy and security policy, and that's really becoming really important for small businesses, just to have something, and that's built into onboarding, is that people agree that, hey, and it's made known, not kind of stuck in the back, like, hey, we are going to watch the data, and, you know, covering yourself from a liability perspective at that point. I mean, that's addressing the risk, right? It's not addressing whether it's privacy or not, but at least you're performing some protection for your organization at that point, making sure that you have employees on that.
Just to add on to that, also, it's security awareness. You know, you're asking, you know, what do you as an employee can expect from the company, and part of it should be the security awareness training that is provided to all individuals to say that, you know, what is the fair use of the computer equipment? Know that we will monitor everything you do on here. So if you're banking from your desktop at work, know that, you know, that information may be exposed to people within the company, and you might decide, you know what, I don't want to do that.
Question up front.
So with an increasing number of, you know, software tools that different companies are being developed right now to support security procedures, and there's also talk about an increasing shortage of staff or workforce that has security training. What are some of the challenges that your organization face, and what are you doing to overcome those challenges?
Well, we certainly all see those. I'll offer a couple insights. One is we work really hard to hold on to the people once we get them, because they can always go somewhere else and we can probably get more money. So the work environment, being flexible, flexible work schedules, giving them things that they want to work on, investing in the security program and making sure that they know that we're going to work on stuff that you're going to want to work on. The other thing that we started doing is, and it's great that the universities now are starting up cybersecurity programs. That pipeline is long overdue, but we are seeing a lot of graduates come out of Purdue and University of Minnesota and other colleges that now you can go get. These kids are very smart. They don't have real life world experience yet, but certainly have the basics and the skills to come right in and be efficient right away. That's kind of how we're tackling it. It's a tough challenge though.
I really agree with the concept of having people be invested in the company in some way. So like being able to make your mark in some way, being able to work on something that matters to you and matters to business goals or business needs. Plus, sometimes it's understanding the nature of the person and like the things that not necessarily are business value to them, but like personal value to them. If they want to understand the customers and clients better, maybe they get to work closer with a client service or account management team. So they actually get exposure that they might want, and that will help them grow.
Great conversation. Is this on?
You're good.
Yeah. Traditionally, I think IT security is focused on more physical assets, systems in a data center, physical security, network connections, and things of that sort. As we move to a more ephemeral world and assets are momentary, how does that change the complexity of your jobs, and how are you responding to that from a perspective of systems that can be spun up and torn down inside of a few hours or a day for a really great DevOps project that ends up staying up far too long and having real data in it, for example. And the issue here, I think, is kind of gets back to that privacy question. When we think about information security, I think we don't necessarily think about information so much as the systems associated with it. And I think that's a change that we're going to be experiencing over the next several years.
Yeah, I don't think it's really a change in what the needs are in protecting the systems. I mean, when you're talking about, from an infrastructure perspective, if you have infrastructure on-prem or if you've got it in the cloud, wherever it may exist, you're going to have the same challenges. I think part of it is the rate at which you're going to have to be implementing these. As you pointed out, you've got the ability to bring up and tear down systems, with a push of a button if you're working on cloud architecture. The whole point there is, as you're spinning up the new connections, the new software, the new systems out there, what do you have in place that is going to protect those new connections as well as the old ones were protected? So from that aspect, I really don't see it as a change in what needs to happen, but the rate at which you have to actually apply these.
Yeah, I heard something once that somebody said if you're going to be in cybersecurity, invest in sneaker wear. You're going to have to be talking to a lot of people, and I tell my people, because we do both knock and sock services, so the knock team guys want to move from the help desk to the security team because it's a cool thing to do. I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? Because you're going to have to do more sales than you ever thought you would. You're going to have to sell what you're doing. You're going to have to sell people on why they need to listen to you, and they don't want to listen to you because you're an annoyance, right? But the point being is that you kind of have to do what I call guerrilla warfare, right? It's if you have a free resource in the security team, hey, I can help you with that project. I can help you build it. Start injecting little pieces of security as you can into these projects early. Plant little seeds with the DevOps guys. Try to get them to do DevSecOps without telling them they're doing DevSecOps, right? And just do as much grassroots as you can and build that into your team. Teach them how to do that. Teach them how to plant those seeds in people so that, hey, when the DevOps guy does want to do that, he comes over and says to the security guy, oh, hey, remember that thing we were talking about? What do you think about this? And they can steer that before, you get into full production. You can't go back anymore. And now you're talking about millions of dollars of revenue for a go back, or of hours. So I guess that would be kind of the way I see it. As Tony said, it comes down to relational, and kind of guerrilla warfare, as I call it.
I think it's managed DevOps.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, it's like security by design, right? It's security by design with DevOps. DevOps is great, and I'm a huge proponent of it, but it's got to be done right.
Yeah.
And it's got to be done with security by design up front versus just the application guys going off and doing DevOps.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
I think the DevOps or DevSecOps, shifting to however you would describe it, I think it's a great opportunity. think ultimately it comes down to these principles. And I think for us, when we think about it, it's automate as much as possible and don't skimp and cut corners, right? And those are the things, I mean, it's the same things that you do today or in a traditional environment, but now with the tooling that's available, in the ability, I think, to and kind of the different skill sets, whether they're data engineers, developers, set people, everyone wants to automate things. I think in IT is kind of a common, theme or motivation. I think when you think about automating as much as possible, I think that's the opportunity to kind of remove some of the risk around the DevOps movement and truly get to DevSecOps. And I think that also is an opportunity to pull compliance or others into the process as well. And kind of there's a value proposition for them in terms of like internal audit and the time they need to spend. If you do it right, that kind of goes away in theory, right? So
it's the thing about automation. Before you can automate a process, you have to have a process.
Or you need a process.
Yeah. So.
All right, I have another question for you guys. There's a lot of programs out there that make companies extremely successful. When dealing with legacy programs, how do you know when the big shiny penny that comes in and says, oh, this is going to fix everything? How do you know when to turn that legacy system off? Because sometimes I'm finding there are certain departments that still use legacy systems and they don't tell you that they're using those systems. Even though you put the new shiny penny in place, you still got two teams that are still using that. So I mean, when do you pull the plug?
So, Jesse, what were we talking about that whole inventory of things? The first practical step is understand what you have and who uses it. If you don't understand all your stakeholders, you don't understand all your data flow, you're going to be in trouble as soon as you turn anything off, because then somebody's going to get called, like, why did you just blow up my whole job, kind of thing. So, yeah, if I can just sum that up, it's know what you got first.
So, I don't think legacy systems ever go away. Everybody tries to, including me, to get rid of the legacy systems in 2003 and soon to be 2008. And they're not going to win. They're going to be there. So then I look at it in the context of, well, how critical is that? I mean, what type of data is on there? What other things can I do? Microsegmentation and network, make sure I've got pattern controls and who can actually access that explicitly to the people that need access. And your example is like, the new shiny one's there, but somebody wants access to the old one. Well, that should be a very small group, and then you define it, carve it off your network a little bit. Only those people can get there because you can't patch it anymore. But boy, if you can answer that question, I'll take your.
Well, I agree with that 100%. A great tactic there is deception. Put a honeypot into those systems so you can, like you said, how do you know? Well, somebody's going to see that 2003 machine and want to get in there. So put another 2003 honeypot in that area, and you'll at least know, right? We got to contain the damage because, like you said, they're not going anywhere, and you have to find some way to cope. So that's to me is a practical step you could take.
And I think fundamentally, a lot of times when people look at legacy systems, it's not an issue of, hey, we're looking to replace the legacy system so much as we're looking to implement a new system, and without going through your due diligence and actually doing the proper analysis of what does that provide to people currently. You can't just jump in a new system and say, well, we want you to work on this new system that only provides half the functionality of the legacy system, right? Because you're crippling your employees at that point. Part of it is having that open dialogue to understand what are the needs that you have for that legacy system. Why are you using it? And does the new system, if we're the new bright shiny penny, is it really taking care of all the needs that you have? And it frankly should be doing it better. Because if you're trading off one system for another and you're not getting any sort of improvement, any sort of efficiency gains, the question comes down to why exactly are you doing this?
Yeah, the problem there is it's all politics, right? So what did I say? You got to be in sales, man. Some department or some executive decide we're doing this because this is what we're doing and it's going to be great for the organization. It's going to digitally transform the organization, and we didn't check with every department on how they use it. And like you said, they're getting all the functionality. And then these people are mad. Why didn't they think about me when they did this? But they always push us in the corner. You begin those department wars. So if you can be a salesman and kind of say, well, how can I help you? Maybe let me see if I can automate. I do this all the time at work. you know, that kind of stuff happens in any organization. I say, okay, well, how can I help you? Like, what do you need to do? Can I maybe help? Can I do some automation for you? I'm good at scripting, and then I'll go, and that goes a long way with people. And then they trust you. You build that trust, and you say, okay, you know, Jesse, he cares about me. He's not pushing me in the corner. And if you can build that relationship, at that point, you might get there. You know, I don't know.
Hi, it's Porroni, probably most, but you know, analytics has involved quite a bit of precision agriculture, and I'm wondering what challenges that's bringing with more and more data being created by autonomous vehicles, drones, satellite imagery, and all the other things analytics is involved in, especially with the feds in the states continue to threaten to bring more internet access to rural areas, and maybe in 2 to 3 years having 5G technology, which will allow pushing a lot of data around rural areas.
That's a big question. So, first of all, the internet access in rural America is our biggest problem, if we want to get it right off the machine, and wireless in particular. So, there's lots of government programs that are funding bringing broadband in rural America. We are part of that. We are on Capitol Hill campaigning for that. There's a privacy issue with farm data, and it's kind of unique because farmers think their data is really sensitive. And it's not, because most of it's in the public domain. You can see who owns a wetland anywhere in the U.S. And you can generally get what production harvest rates are off on in a general geographic area, but boy, they don't want to share that information. So us, as a collector of that data, because we provide a lot of ag technology services back to them, prescriptions on how they can get more out of their field, we have to treat it like it is the most sensitive data, like anything we own. So we do all the security things that anybody would do with their private IP or sensitive data. If it's our customers' data, they believe it's sensitive and private, and that's how we're going to treat it, even though realistically it may not be. But the rural America challenge for broadband and wireless is really the biggest issue. Most of these guys, especially when you think about the harvester and tractor, is collecting a lot of that data. They put it on thumb drives, they go back and they share it with 3 or 4 partners that they need to share it with. It's cumbersome, but you can do it. Monitoring and meters, that's probably the biggest thing, is if you want sensors in the field and you can't get a wireless signal. And 5G is not going to fix the issue in rural America. 5G's got less distribution than what 4G and 3G's got. And we don't need 5G, we only need 3G. This is like small amounts of data that comes out of the sensors. You don't need 5G. You just need a signal.
Blockchain, it's going to solve it all.
He said the B word.
So my question is regarding so for example, cybersecurity insurance. Like a few years ago, you could easily say insurance would only cover severance and right? One of the new approaches is we kind of going with the secure way, everything is at a cloud-based. And how do you approach the insurance side of things, whether between physical insurance and insurance and cybersecurity?
Yeah, it's economics, right? So as this has become advent in technology, insurance companies are adapting. Most will offer cybersecurity insurance separate, and are starting to say that they won't cover cybersecurity issues under a standard policy. With that, what we're seeing is now they used to just give the insurance. Now they're requiring some sort of framework in place, like are you doing X, Y, and Z, and it's based off of like a NIST questionnaire or something like that. That somebody kind of cherry picks some things. Are you doing IDS? Are you doing endpoint? You can say yes, but what happens when you get briefs and they find out that you weren't doing that, and you just paid up, you've been paying these premiums and you don't get anything. So to answer your question, you definitely do see insurance companies offering specific cybersecurity insurance now. It's actually starting to become pretty common. But secondly, you need to provide someone with due care to qualify for those policies, or at least to have a good premium. Like the higher risk your environment is, they're going to charge you a higher premium, right? So it's like any insurance structure.
Yeah, we've had cyber insurance for many years. I can attest and agree that the questions are getting a lot more diligent.
Yeah, they are.
Probably 5 or 6 years ago, we negotiated a rate and coverage, and we were done. Nobody asked me anything. I couldn't believe it. The questionnaire I get now, though, is quite extensive.
Yeah.
And that's how they assess your posture and what your premium is going to be based on the coverage that you want. But it will cover things in the cloud if you cover it.
And see, in the future, it's only going to get more and more actually invasive. They're going to start asking about what are you doing here, what are you doing, down to minute details. You know, because they're looking at it from the aspect of, you know, if there's a breach, it's going to cost millions. That's just the way it's going to be. And so any policy that they're going to put out there, regardless of what premiums you're paying for them, if the company's not doing their due diligence, in fact, I would think insurance companies would.
Yeah, no, I was going to agree with you. I don't know if you guys heard, but Zurich declined the payments for the not paid yet tax. They said they're not going to cover it. Right? Yeah. Because they said it was an act of war.
And here's the thing you got to really think about from the insurance perspective. They want you to basically fill out false information on these things to get the policy, because they're very happy to take your money. But the moment there's a claim, yes, they're going to come in, and they're going to come in with full force to figure out, was there anything that you lied about on these things? Did you do everything you said? Because the moment they find something you didn't, hey, we don't have to pay that policy. That's money in their pocket. So from that aspect, you know, understanding how the controls work and understanding how to get in there and do the due diligence, if you're talking about doing like NIST compliance, is going to become more and more prevalent in companies across America. Just from the aspect that you're going to have to, I mean, the NIST keeps changing, it keeps getting more detailed, and that's kind of the framework for a lot of the control systems that you see out there. And companies are going to have to understand that and understand how to better handle those controls and do that risk prior to ever thinking about getting insurance. Because if you go in there and you can identify areas where, hey, we're not compliant here and here and here, do you really want to get a policy that is not going to pay just to say, well, we have a policy in case something happens? So it does come down to what is the risk versus reward on this.
And I will say, though, it doesn't have to be difficult. I think what it's about is making that you have to demonstrate due care, like HIPAA is. We have some HIPAA customers, so I'm pretty familiar with those regulations. We're HIPAA compliant as well. So you have to demonstrate due care. Like, you don't have to have the best, most technological SOC full of monitors everywhere, but you have to show that you're trying. And if you can show that it's demonstrated over a period, even journals like today went through and checked all the logins, or today, you know, to show that you're meeting those requirements over the course of time, you know, you just have to be diligent about it, you know. So.
This is the time where we open up the questions.
I got a quick question. It's just about what keeping you up at night is your employees. And you try to insure yourself and get insurance and make sure you do the right thing and you put everything in force. But your vendors, do they keep you up at night, do what their people are doing? And are they insured? And how do you check if they're insured? And what do you look for in vendors in their programs before you take one? Or your business is taking one? You can security on it?
Yeah, this one?
Sure. So let me define vendor in my terms first. I think there's a couple. So, you know, you got the HVAC guys that come in, they need to get to the system. And you got SaaS vendors, they're a vendor. What are they doing? So I'll talk at SaaS first. They have a third-party vendor management program we're trying to get off the ground with not very many people. So SaaS, all starts with the contract and the T's and C's up front. We look at things like, do they have a SOC 2 report? What type of data are we putting out there? All the normal compliance things, right to audit. Do they have a security program? Do they have a list? Let me see that. So we kind of go through that whole program to rate who we're looking to work with and what type of data we're putting out there. And then we make a judgment. Well, look, they don't have a SOC 2 report, they don't seem to have much of a security program, and you're talking about putting HR payroll data up there. That's not a good idea of business. Yeah. So then you got to be in front of that. The other vendors that come in to do whatever they're doing to attach to something on the plant floor, you know, we have conditional access for every vendor. You have to have unique IDs, no sharing IDs. You got multi-factor in. We inspect the device when it's coming in. Does it have antivirus and malware and firewalls turned on? Otherwise, you're not letting you come in. Firewall rules that the DSA only let you get to the device you're targeting. A lot of times we'll put a jump host in, so we clean the machine away and we put the jump host in, they hit the jump host.
But you provide an opinion, right, in technology, because it's still a business tool code that with SaaS provided to the business wants it, and you do the assessment. You can assess the impact to the business, and ultimately decide. It's not technology.
That kind of goes back to the relationship and the relationship you have with the business and how much they're going to listen to you, right? And I have one avenue for escalation, that the cybersecurity sponsor team that I have. If I feel like I'm being overrun and we're making a terrible mistake, that's where I go.
Right.
Yeah, I think the term I've been hearing with much more frequency lately is zero trust. So I think trying now to get in early and start working towards a zero trust model is going to really help that, because if you force them, if you're forcing your users or your vendors to authenticate, at every step, it's again more tripwires for an attacker to trip up on in the process. So I think working that's a side piece, and if you ask me what's kind of the new thing that everyone's restaurant, I personally think it's going to be a zero trust type of approach.
Well, I think it comes down to making sure you're doing your due care and your due diligence when you talk about third parties. Just like Tony was saying, you've got to go out and you've got to evaluate them. You've got to make sure that they are competent about what they're doing, because you look at companies out there, and, talk about HVAC. Well, you can get into an HVAC company to siphon data out of systems as well. You got to understand what access they have to your system, what they could potentially get to, and you also have to make sure that you put the proper controls in place and say, we know who you are, we know why you're here, we know how long you're here for, and make sure that that sort of thing is regulated and shut down. It comes down to proper planning and policies, making sure that they're in place, and then making sure folks are following them.
So maybe an idea here, we have a little less than 10 minutes left. We can take a few more questions, or maybe each of you would want to give us a takeaway thought or concept.
We have questions.
Well, you want to see if they have more questions?
I'll go ahead and pitch a question. So in terms of selecting, we were just talking about thank you. We were just talking about vendors and whatnot. So in terms of selecting vendors, how as a CISO, how closely do you look at where that company is going to be at 5, 10, 15 years from now, based on where you want it to be at? What I see is my background is operations. So what I see as an operations guy is a lot of industries are beginning to monopolize, and those bigger companies in different industries are starting to either merge or acquire or put other companies out of business, and they're buying them up. So in terms of your cybersecurity posture and making sure that that is in good health, how do you look at that 5, 10 years down the road if those companies are going out of business and you're still like thousands of iterations down the road from when you first implemented that system? Does that make sense?
For the most part, the two things to that, of course, I lean toward some of the folks up here deal more with vendors than I do or my company does. One is to just kind of almost include that in the process of evaluation. Is to say, okay, what is our likelihood of needing this service in this way and in this depth of connection with that vendor? Like, how intertwined are you actually going to get? And watch for that. That's part of doing due diligence up front is also continuing to evaluate that relationship and seeing how much you're committed and how much your information is committed. Now, obviously, that changes depending on the type of vendor and the type of mission critical nature of that vendor or what they're supporting.
And to that point, a lot of when you talk about vendor relationships, there should be a constant cycle of going through and taking a look, at least on a yearly or annual basis, to say, what's the health of this other company? Because you never want to be in a spot where a company, you're looking at it and you're struggling. You probably at that point want to start looking at, well, what are my other options out there, and not just blindly go out there and say, oh, I put all my trust in this company, and 2 years down the road, it's closed, and you're stuck at that point. If you're out there and you're looking, trying to figure out what's going on with these companies, how are they healthy, and every so often maybe you're taking what they have, go out for RFP and say, okay, let's put it out there and see what else we get, because things are, technology is always changing. Whatever you're going to send to a third party, you never know when there might be somebody else who's coming along that can do it better, faster, cheaper. So from that perspective, with your vendors, it's always a constant, let's take a look at these relationships and let's make sure they're solid as we move forward, but also be looking on behalf of the company to say what is the best possible value we can derive from other third parties.
I'm not sure if your question was around security technologies or business functions, so I'm going to answer from security technologies first because we do look at a lot of Silicon Valley companies to invest in, and it raises the question that you brought up is like, so if I invest in this company, who says they're going to be around or who's going to buy them? I think if the technology appears sound and you do a good judgment, somebody's going to buy them and then you'll live with whoever buys them. For me, I just hope and pray that the ones I don't like don't buy them. And the companies I do like, we buy them. Because I'm okay with them being bought. Because typically, that's what Silicon Valley does, right? They have startups that, for the most part, look to get bought, so somebody's going to buy them. If it's a more critical business function, which I'm not in that space necessarily, but I know we're a lot more cautious there. We wouldn't necessarily buy into a startup for a key function within the business.
Yeah, there's some interesting technologies, software out there now that will do risk, dynamic risk for you, where they'll actually monitor headlines in social media for if there's a lawsuit or financial problems against these companies. And they'll actually dynamically raise the risk level, and you can set alerts and do all sorts of things like that. So I don't know, if that's something that kind of you're thinking of, but like, right, if a company starts to get into trouble, how do we know that, right? So there's some new software tools out there that do that for you. So.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that, a lot of these companies keep their mouths shut.
Right.
They know what's going on. I mean, I was going through a situation where, we were looking at doing business with a clean energy company. 3 months we went through talks. A week before they tell us, next week we're liquidating our division. Next week we're liquidating our division. Oh, really? You just decided that in the last week? We've been talking for 3 months. So it's kind of like a balancing act of being able to see what's the forest through the trees, what's really going on. Not what people are telling you, but what is the market doing, what's trending, and just being able to foresee that and then adjust your security posture and adjust your technology infrastructure accordingly.
That's why you're also getting more regulation around when you start talking about security operations, when you're reporting things like data breaches, because companies would be out there, data breaches would happen, and they would keep quiet about it. We don't want to tell anyone. But folks, this is the kind of information that needs to get out there. Yes, it's going to hurt a company's reputation, but think about all the people that are going to have issues because of that data breach. So the sooner that we can reach those people, the sooner that they can start taking measures to help mitigate that data breach.
Yeah, one more thing, just the thought that I had while we were talking about this, and that's how you get legacy systems.
Question.
Yeah, I heard Jesse talk earlier about the CISO role and mentioning that small companies don't have a CISO. Just commentary on virtual CISOs.
Well, that's I guess that's a softball because that's the one service our company provides. So I think they're fantastic. But no, I think this was another question that we tossed around. Is like, when do you outsource and when do you bring in a CISO and what functions do you need? I think every business needs to be thinking about security, and especially getting a small, just 10-point security policy list together and have a place to start somewhere. And so I think if you have an IT manager who's competent and can do that, you maybe don't need a CISO, or maybe a CISO can help. But I think we see a lot of value for our customers because we can give a starting point. So I guess that's what do I think about it. I think it's important to be security focused, and if you don't have the internal resources, it's probably a good idea to start doing most work for it.
And Steve, you were starting to talk about possible last thoughts about this, and that's actually where my mind was going. Folks got to understand security is everyone's responsibility. It just doesn't sit in the CISO, it doesn't sit in the security team. Security is something that across a company and across your daily life, you're all responsible for your own security of your own personal information. It's something that continues on. From a company perspective, the more you can drive individuals further up the stream to understand what security means, such as you start talking about if you're developing start with, or pushing it up in actually into planning. So you start doing out-of-the-box thinking sessions about what kind of attack vectors are there, so that we can make sure that you're taking care of these things. The farther you can push that upstream, the better systems you're going to have downstream. Running in there and trying to cobble something together so you can get something out the door looks really good on the marketing guy's dashboard. But when you go look at security, about how many times that thing has to come back and how many issues and problems it creates, we're going over and over doing the same thing. And the question is, how much business value are you driving at that point, because you're basically patching security for us.
Hi, Austin from Department Q. We help very small companies with their IT. So for small businesses, 10 to 50 employees, what are some things that those companies can be expected to implement on their own? Most of them don't have anyone to deal with things like GDPR and iTrust. They're not big enough for that stuff. They know PCI, but that's about it. What are some steps that they can take as small businesses?
So I'm going to do some of what Lou did and get to a degree of a parting thought, because I think that this is so critical. And again, this is something that just inspired. Is inventory. Like know what you have, know where you have it, know who's using it, know why they're using it, and know like how long they've been using it. Like should something go down, or should there be a threat of some sort? Should there be damage? How does that impact, and in what ways? I mean, if you want to game out some of that, keep leveling up in your amount of difficulty, or the kind of things that you want to analyze. Start like red teaming in a way. Think about the problem, and if it metastasize, what is its back, where does this go, all that kind of stuff. But the first part is just know you have to use it.
Yeah, I think, totally. Asset inventory for small businesses is number one. Because once you know what abnormal looks like, or what normal looks like, it's a lot easier to spot abnormal. And then the other thing, as Adam said, is what are the crown jewels of business? What are our line of businesses that we can't live without? And you can do some quick napkin math and say, if our Active Directory is down for a day and people can't work, what does that cost us? An owner can probably tell you that. Right? And so that's where you can start making some priorities and judgments on where to start.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is you just have to sit down and you say, folks, what are the problems we either expect to experience and the ones we are experiencing. And then sit down, prioritize, figure out what's it going to take care of these. And basically starting with that kind of thinking, and then moving forward to say, well, let's start implementing. In a small company, it's not going to be, hey, let's do everything at once. Let's not become HIPAA compliant overnight. It doesn't happen that way. But you got to start someplace. And starting with understanding what you have, understanding your systems, understanding where your greatest risk is, and then figuring out how you can prioritize your resources to take care of those things is typically your best way to start moving forward with that.
All right, so we are essentially at time, so one last call for questions. If there aren't any other questions, I'll just ask the panelists to leave us with a small parting thought.
Main parting thought, if you haven't Googled the critical controls, do it now.
Yeah, I would say parting thought, that's interesting you said that. The CIS controls, they just came out with a new version, so there's small business ones now that are stepped down. Great place to start, but I think parting thought is to trust but verify. I really think that zero trust is going to become more attainable, and we should all start thinking that way. So start thinking of the zero trust model. When you deploy a server, don't let everyone on the network access it. Treat people inside your network and the controls you're putting on that server the same as the outside of the network. So I think really taking a zero trust approach is probably the best way to start building in security from the ground level projects.
So I'd echo measuring your security program using NIST or CIS Top 20, anyone, but do a true assessment of what you're doing. Then apply that back to your business and what things are really critical, and where do you need to be like a 5 in an area versus a 3, or it doesn't really apply. But measure your program so you can demonstrate where you're at today and what your growth is going to be for whoever you need to report to and go get the funds and justify the resources and everything that you're trying to get done. And I think in this world of cloud, identity is huge, conditional access, federated identity, and don't let identities get away from you, because people will come and go and your identity will be stuck there.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is as I was saying, driving security awareness across your organization. Security starts with planning. You can go out there and you can add haphazard controls all over the place, trying to catch up to where you think you should be. But sitting down, starting with a well thought out plan, figuring out what the biggest risks are you want to mitigate is really where you need to take a look to make sure that you're getting the biggest ROI. Because there are some things that you're going to look at that you're going to say, you know, the cost of implementing a control here, it just simply outweighs what we're getting back in this. And you decide we're not going to do that. You know, there's no secret sauce, there's no magic bullet that gets it all done. It requires you to do a lot of the legwork, do a lot of the analysis, and craft a plan and move forward on it.
All right, well, thanks to our panel. I think it was a great